What unfolds when an overconfident lawyer believes he can outwit Judge Caprio in his own courtroom? Your Honor, with all due respect, you clearly don't understand the complexities of modern contract law. The words dropped into the air like a lit fuse ready to explode. Attorney Michael Richardson had just committed the greatest mistake of his legal career. He had publicly questioned Judge Frank Caprio's knowledge in front of a crowded courtroom, rolling TV cameras and thousands of viewers. What followed would cement itself as legend in Providence's legal community. Judge Caprio slowly slid off his reading glasses, fixed his eyes directly on the arrogant attorney, and spoke words that would permanently shatter Richardson's reputation. But what no one inside that courtroom realized was that Richardson had been orchestrating this showdown for weeks. He believed Judge Caprio's nationally televised courtroom was the perfect stage to catapult his own career. Instead, he was about to learn why Frank Caprio is known as the most respected judge in America. If you want to see how true leadership responds to arrogance and disrespect, you're about to watch a masterclass in judicial authority that will leave you stunned. The morning of October 15th began like countless others inside Providence Municipal Court. Judge Frank Caprio arrived promptly at 7:30 a.m., just as he had done every weekday for more than 2 decades. At 73 years old, he carried the same energy, quick humor, and sharp intellect that had made him a beloved figure, not only in Providence, but worldwide through his television program Caught in Providence. The courtroom buzzed with its usual mix of defendants, attorneys, family members, and the ever-present television crew documenting Judge Caprio's compassionate style of justice. But this day held something different. In attendance was attorney Michael Richardson, a 35-year-old Harvard Law graduate who had recently relocated to Providence from Boston. Richardson was representing the Peton Corporation in what appeared to be a routine contract dispute. Yet those familiar with his Boston reputation knew Richardson never approached any case as routine. He was notorious for his aggressive courtroom tactics, his inflated sense of self-importance, and his unshakable belief that his Ivy League credentials placed him above what he dismissively called small-town judges. For 3 straight weeks, Richardson bragged to colleagues in downtown Providence law offices that he was going to expose that old TV judge and prove what real lawyering looked like. He pored over Judge Caprio's past cases, studied hours of Caught in Providence footage, and convinced himself that Caprio's compassion was not strength, but a weakness in the law. Richardson's plan was methodical: provoke a confrontation on live television, showcase his supposed legal superiority, and use the viral clip to establish himself as Rhode Island's top attorney. He had assembled multiple intricate legal arguments intended to mislead and humiliate Judge Caprio. What Richardson failed to realize was that Judge Caprio had been practicing law long before Richardson had even been born. He also didn't realize that Caprio had presided over more than 250,000 cases during his career. And he absolutely didn't realize that behind the judge's kindly, grandfather-like appearance rested one of the most brilliant legal minds on the East Coast. The matter was titled Peton Corporation versus Rossetti Construction. On the surface, it appeared to be a simple breach of contract case. Rossetti Construction had allegedly neglected to finish a commercial building project within the required timeframe, and Peton was demanding $800,000 in damages. As proceedings opened, Judge Caprio examined the case documents with his usual meticulous care. The plaintiff's side, represented by Richardson, argued that Rossetti's 2-week delay had deprived them of significant rental income from possible tenants. "Your Honor," Richardson began, his tone dripping with arrogance, "this is a textbook instance of contractual violation. The defendant failed to honor the specified deadline, and the Massachusetts precedent in Brookfield v. Hamilton Construction clearly outlines the liability for such delays." Judge Caprio glanced up from the paperwork. "Counselor, this is Rhode Island, not Massachusetts. Our case law may differ." Richardson gave a smug grin. This was precisely the chance he had been waiting for. "Your Honor, with respect, you clearly lack an understanding of the intricacies of contemporary contract law. Federal precedents and interstate commerce rules override local interpretations. Perhaps if you had studied at a genuine law school rather than," he paused with deliberate drama, "having researched Caprio's history, Suffolk University, you might grasp these distinctions." The entire courtroom went utterly still. Even the camera crew froze in place. Richardson had just insulted not only Judge Caprio's legal expertise but also his educational background. No one disparaged Frank Caprio's schooling in his own courtroom and left without consequence. The silence lingered like an eternity, though in truth it lasted barely 10 seconds. Judge Caprio calmly removed his reading glasses, placed them neatly on the bench, and fixed his gaze directly on Richardson. His facial expression remained unchanged, but everyone present could feel the sudden chill in the room. "Mr. Richardson," Judge Caprio said in that composed, deliberate tone beloved by audiences worldwide, "I would like to be absolutely certain that I understand your argument correctly. Are you suggesting, in your professional judgment, that I am not qualified to preside over this matter?" Judge Caprio asked. Richardson, encouraged by what he mistook as hesitation, pressed forward. "Your Honor, I'm merely pointing out that complicated commercial disputes demand an advanced grasp of interstate commerce law, something that may fall outside the scope of ordinary municipal court practice." Judge Caprio slowly inclined his head. "I understand, Mr. Richardson. Before we continue with your advanced arguments, I'd like to pose a few questions about this case. You referenced Massachusetts precedent. Have you reviewed Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13, which deals with construction contracts?" "Your Honor, as I've said, federal precedent. That isn't what I asked, Counselor. Have you reviewed Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13? Richardson paused. He had concentrated so heavily on preparing his federal arguments that he had neglected to research Rhode Island state statutes thoroughly. "Your Honor, I believe federal precedent should control, Mr. Richardson," Judge Caprio cut in, his voice still steady but now edged with steel that pulled everyone in closer. "You're standing in my courtroom in the state of Rhode Island, litigating a dispute involving Rhode Island contractors under Rhode Island law. So let me ask you again, have you reviewed Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13? The smugness began draining from Richardson's face. "No, Your Honor, but I thought as much." Judge Caprio opened a large law volume resting on his desk. Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13, Section 15, deals directly with delays caused by weather. It clearly states, and I quote, "Delays resulting from weather conditions that exceed the seasonal average by more than 20% shall not be considered a breach of contract, provided the contractor shows reasonable effort to maintain the project schedule." He lifted his gaze toward Richardson, whose confident grin had completely vanished. "Now then, Mr. Richardson, did you examine the weather records for September and October of last year?" "Your Honor, I don't see how weather—" "Answer the question, Counselor." "No, Your Honor." Judge Caprio drew out another document. "The National Weather Service reports indicate that rainfall during September and October was 34% above the 30-year seasonal average. Under Rhode Island law, this constitutes a legally recognized exemption." The courtroom was so still you could hear the low hum of the air conditioning. Richardson's expression had shifted, first confident, then uneasy, and now openly anxious. But Judge Caprio wasn't through. What came next would not only shatter Richardson's arrogance but also give everyone present a masterclass in preparation, respect, and genuine legal skill. "Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications," the narrator's voice seemed to echo, "because what Judge Caprio delivers next will forever change the way you see judicial authority and expertise. Furthermore, Mr. Richardson," Judge Caprio pressed on, his voice firming with strength, "you remarked that my Suffolk University education was not from a real law school. I'm curious, how thoroughly did you prepare for this hearing? Did you happen to research opposing counsel's background?" Richardson frowned, baffled. "Your Honor, I fail to see the relevance." "The relevance, Counselor, is competence. Mr. Rossetti is represented by attorney Sarah Chun, who, according to my notes, graduated from Harvard Law School, class of 1998. The very same institution you attended. The difference, however, is that she finished summa cum laude." Color drained from Richardson's face as it dawned on him just how incomplete his preparation had been. "Now then," Judge Caprio continued, "Attorney Chun filed a motion 3 days ago citing the exact weather delay exemption statute I just referenced. Did you review that motion, Mr. Richardson?" Yes, Your Honor, and did you submit a counter-motion addressing that exemption?" The silence lengthened. Richardson hadn't filed one, because he hadn't even understood the Rhode Island statute Attorney Chun had raised. "I'll take that as a no," Judge Caprio concluded. "So let's be clear, Mr. Richardson. You entered my courtroom, disparaged my education, declared that I lacked understanding of contract law, yet you failed to study the most basic Rhode Island statutes governing this dispute. You didn't examine weather records that any first-year law student would check, and you ignored opposing counsel's motion entirely." Richardson opened his mouth to respond, but Judge Caprio raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not finished, Counselor. You also invoked Massachusetts precedent in Brookfield v. Hamilton Construction. I'm well aware of that case. It was overturned by the Massachusetts Supreme Court in 2019. Were you aware of that? Richardson's jaw worked helplessly, opening and closing like a fish out of water. Clearly he had no idea the ruling had been reversed. The overturning decision clearly stated that weather-related delays cannot be deemed a breach of contract unless there is specific proof of contractor negligence. Mr. Richardson, Judge Caprio asked evenly, are you prepared to present such evidence? Your Honor, Richardson faltered. We have no evidence of negligence, no grasp of Rhode Island law, no awareness that the precedent you cited had been overturned, no countermotion against opposing counsel's filing. Judge Caprio's tone stayed calm, but every phrase landed like a hammer on steel. Tell me, Mr. Richardson, what exactly did you prepare for this hearing? The courtroom was still as stone, broken only by the sound of Richardson's uneven breathing. His arrogance had vanished, replaced with the dawning recognition that he had stepped straight into a trap of his own making. Now then, Judge Caprio continued, you implied that my Suffolk University education was somehow insufficient for this matter. Let me share a few things with you, counselor. I have been practicing law for 47 years. I have presided over more than 250,000 cases. My rulings have been cited by the Rhode Island Supreme Court 23 times. I have taught constitutional law at Providence College for 15 years. He leaned forward slightly, his voice adopting the patient but firm cadence of a disappointed grandfather. But more importantly, Mr. Richardson, across all those years and all those cases, I learned something they apparently failed to teach at Harvard Law School. The first rule of being an attorney is knowing what you don't know. The second is never, insulting a judge when you haven't done your homework. Richardson stood rooted in place, his former bravado utterly broken. What followed would become legendary in Providence legal history, altering forever the way lawyers prepared for hearings in Judge Caprio's courtroom. Mr. Richardson, Judge Caprio said, opening the thick case file once more, I am going to do something you might not expect. Despite your unprofessional conduct and your lack of preparation, I will grant you the chance to properly represent your client. Richardson glanced up in disbelief. I am continuing this case for 2 weeks. In that time, you will study Rhode Island General Laws, Title VI, Chapter 13 in its entirety. You will research Rhode Island case law on construction delays. You will examine all weather data for the project period. You will file the appropriate motions addressing Attorney Chun's weather exemption argument. And you will prepare your case as though your client's interests actually matter to you. The judge's tone stayed steady, but now carried the unmistakable weight of final authority. Beneath his calm tone was steel. Furthermore, Mr. Richardson, Judge Caprio said, you will draft a formal written apology to this court for your unprofessional behavior, not because your remarks offended me personally, but because respect for the judicial system is the foundation of practicing law. Richardson bobbed his head quickly. Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not finished, counselor. Judge Caprio's voice cut the air like a blade. If you return to my courtroom again unprepared, if you display the same disrespect, or if you show the arrogance you've shown here today, I will not only dismiss your case, I will file a formal complaint with the Rhode Island Bar Association questioning your competence and professionalism. The warning hung heavy, suspended like a sword above Richardson's head. Do I make myself clear, Mr. Richardson? Perfectly clear, Your Honor. Judge Caprio turned his gaze outward, to the crowded courtroom, the cameras, and the countless viewers who would one day watch this moment unfold across the world. Let this stand as a lesson to everyone watching, he declared, his voice ringing with decades of earned authority. The law is not about ego. It is not about flaunting credentials or intimidating opponents. The law is about service, service to your client, service to justice, and service to truth. His eyes returned to Richardson, who now stood with his head lowered in shame. In this courtroom, I don't care if your degree is from Harvard or from a community college. I don't care if you walk in wearing a $5,000 suit or a $50 one. What I care about is preparation. What I care about is respect. What I care about is competence. And above all, I care about treating every individual who comes through these doors with dignity. Judge Caprio lifted his gavel. Mr. Richardson, use these next 2 weeks wisely. Learn Rhode Island law. Learn respect. And learn humility. The gavel struck with a decisive crack. Court is adjourned until October 29th. But the story did not end there. What unfolded in the weeks ahead would prove why Judge Frank Caprio's brand of justice earned admiration across the globe. So make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell on, because you will not believe what happened when Michael Richardson walked back into court 2 weeks later. As the gallery emptied, Richardson remained at the plaintiff's table, staring down at his papers. The arrogance that had carried him through Harvard, through his Boston practice and into Providence, had been dismantled piece by piece by a 73-year-old judge who embodied true authority. He had never once raised his voice. Attorney Sarah Chun, counsel for the defense, approached Richardson as he shoved papers into his briefcase. "Mr. Richardson," she said softly, "a word of advice. Judge Caprio is the most knowledgeable and the fairest judge in Rhode Island. If you walk back in here in 2 weeks with the same arrogance, he'll end your career in this state." Richardson looked up, shaken. How did he know all that? The weather data, the overturned precedent, the Rhode Island statutes? Chun smiled faintly. Because he does his homework. Always. Judge Caprio reads every case file 3 times before a hearing. He researches every precedent cited. He knows Rhode Island law better than attorneys who've practiced here their entire lives. You thought you could embarrass him on television? He's been dismantling lawyers like you longer than you've been alive. As Richardson exited the courthouse, camera crews swarmed him. Local reporters shouted questions. His phone buzzed nonstop, messages from colleagues who had just watched the live stream. The footage of his humiliation racked up over 2 million views within the first 48 hours. Legal blogs dissected Judge Caprio's surgical takedown of his arguments. Law professors assigned the clip in classrooms as a masterclass in judicial authority. But the most profound effect was inside Providence's legal circles. Within days, attorneys were logging late nights, triple-checking Rhode Island statutes before stepping into Caprio's courtroom. Bar Association seminars on courtroom decorum hit record attendance. Young lawyers whispered about Richardson's public fall and made sure their own case prep was airtight. 2 weeks later, October 29th, Richardson returned. He did not look like the same man. His demeanor was quieter, his posture more respectful. He had poured 80 hours into researching Rhode Island construction law. He had filed meticulous motions addressing every element of Attorney Chun's weather delay exemption. He had drafted and rewritten his apology to Judge Caprio 7 times until the words felt right. When court opened, Richardson rose. His voice was steady but humbled. "Your Honor, I want to offer a formal apology for my behavior 2 weeks ago. I was unprepared, I was disrespectful, and I was unprofessional. Over these past 2 weeks, I've dedicated myself to studying Rhode Island law and properly preparing this case. And I want to thank you for giving me a second chance to represent my client." He represented his client with competence. Judge Caprio gave a nod. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Now let's continue with the matter." What happened next was a textbook example of proper courtroom practice. Richardson delivered his arguments with clarity, cited the correct Rhode Island precedents, and displayed full respect toward both the court and opposing counsel. Although he eventually lost, since the weather exemption statute was straightforward, he maintained professionalism from start to finish. When the hearing ended, Judge Caprio asked Richardson to approach the bench. "Counselor, that was outstanding legal advocacy. You defended your client passionately while still honoring the court and the law. This is precisely how our justice system should function." For the first time in years, Richardson felt something unfamiliar. True pride, not in winning but in the quality of his legal performance. His personal transformation soon became well known within Providence's legal community. Richardson later rose to become one of Rhode Island's most respected lawyers, recognized for his thorough preparation and unwavering courtroom respect. He never lost sight of the lesson Judge Caprio had instilled, the crucial difference between legal knowledge and genuine legal wisdom. Years later, when speaking to young attorneys, Richardson would often say, "Judge Caprio didn't crush my arrogance to disgrace me. He broke it down to save my career. He showed me that the practice of law isn't about proving you're the smartest person in the room, it's about being the most prepared, the most respectful, and the most dedicated to justice." The recording of that October session eventually became one of the most viewed episodes of Caught in Providence. But for those who personally knew Judge Caprio, it was nothing unusual. It was simply another demonstration of his unique gift, the ability to correct with dignity, to teach through fairness, and to turn arrogance into humility and wisdom. In a world where authority so often corrupts, Judge Frank Caprio reminded everyone that true authority doesn't stem from power, but from knowledge, preparation, and an unshakable devotion to what is right. He proved that arrogance is best defeated not with rage, but with calm, deliberate proof of superior competence. That is why Judge Caprio isn't only a beloved television figure. He is a model of judicial leadership, showing consistently that respect must be earned, authority must be justified, and justice must always be carried out with firmness and compassion.